let me say welcome and thank you for joining us. Vítejte. Děkujeme, že jste se rozhodli zúčastnit našeho sympozia. So apologies for how butchered that may have been, but we really are happy you're here. Let's begin with a premise. No data, no data space. And of course, with apologies to Bob Marley and the Wailers. When we say data, we mean not only the data that has always made our sector what it is, the digital objects that your cultural institutions are making available to wider audiences. We also, when we say data, we mean data about our sector. That kind of data is essential for benchmarking our progress and for decision-making. We hope that during this morning together that you can add to the thinking of all of the panelists who are part of this conference. In terms of participants that we have there, some of you are already convinced that measuring progress is helping you progress. Almost 2 in 5 of you who registered for this event already collect data about your institution's digital transformation. For those of you who are already measuring and those of you who want to measure, we welcome you from across the world, from Australia, from Brazil, across Europe, with a special welcome to our hosts from the Czech Republic, from Czechia. I'm going to go ahead and address the slide that's up and then say a few more words. We are using simultaneous translators during the event. I'll let you read that slide, but please decide what language is going to work best for you. I don't know whether you can toggle back and forth during, they'll tell you in the chat, but in case. Further, many of you are already members of the Europeana Network Association, almost 60% of the audience. For those who aren't, you may want to follow the link that'll be in the chat to sign up, and then you'll be among the first to know about programs just like this one. To everybody, we want to hear from you throughout the event, whether it's in the chat or in the Q&A, with questions for our speakers today, or thoughts and considerations for the longer term. Please weigh in. It's very helpful to have it be as interactive as possible. On that note, in terms of weighing in, please take note of our guidelines for positive, successful interactions in these events. We have a whole series of considerations for an open, thoughtful, and respectful process of interacting with one another. I'm going to check and see if there are any questions in the chat, besides a bunch of really lovely good mornings and hellos from people. And without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Mr. Ondřej Profant. Mr. Profant is the Deputy Minister for Digitization at the Ministry of Regional Development of the Czech Republic. As one of the authors of the Act on the Right to Digital Services, he's also involved in the implementation of that act. Previously, he served on the Council of the City of Prague and then the Chamber of Deputies. And with that, Ondřej, the floor is yours.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, culture is important. Culture is our backbone and conceit and our pleasure. In our current digital age, even more so. That's why we need to learn to work with culture, to enjoy it, what it can give us, and help it thrive it in this new digital era. I am from the Pirate Party, a party that derives its value, its program, and I dare to say its subculture from the internet, from the hacker manifestos, as well as internet humor and memes. Some people say that the internet and the digital age is destroying the old classical culture. Some say it brings a new culture of the digital age. I think both are right. The culture isn't supposed to be stored in a museum behind the think glass, sealed forever. Culture is an ever-changing animal, and we all have to learn to live with the new reality. And what a reality it is, to bring unprecedented possibilities. Already you can see the most famous work of art from the comfort of your living room. But we can do more. Using the virtual worlds, we can travel in time and witness this work being created. Or we can watch our favorite films and read our favorite books anywhere in the world. I can take all the greatest novel even written with me to the beach. However, hand in hand with possibilities comes the need for understanding. Changes we are experiencing are fast and sometimes disturbing. And one way to understand is through transparency and openness. You can be scared of things you cannot see. Openness, on the other hand, promotes understanding, diversity, and accessibility for all, which for me is exactly the spirit of Europe. Openness and diversity is value itself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andre. I love that quote that we're scared of that which we cannot see, which is so true. It goes from childhood on, I guess. Wonderful. Thank you. Next, it is my pleasure to invite Ms. Rahana Schwinniger-Ladek to our virtual stage. Ms. Schwinniger-Ladek is the head of the unit for interactive technologies and digital for culture and education, DG Connect at the European Commission. And I'll hand it over to you, Rahana.
Thanks a lot, Hannah. Can you hear me? All right, great. So very good morning to everyone from wherever you are connecting. So it's my pleasure to speak at this Europeana Presidency Conference under the auspices of the Czech Presidency of the Council. I'm very honored and pleased that Mr. Profan, the Deputy Minister of Digitization, is attending and he spoke. So really thanks a lot to him, and thanks a lot to our hosts at the Czech National Heritage Institute for supporting this event. So the theme of the event today is really important, and I would like you to take on a time journey with me, because when we speak about culture, it's also about having these journeys back and forth through time. So please fasten your seatbelts. So the year is 2025. We have to assess to what extent the intermediate targets mentioned in the recommendation on a common European data space for cultural heritage, which is our policy framework, which was adopted 4 years ago. Remember, we're in 2025. So to what extent these intermediate targets have been achieved, whether we have been able to preserve some of our most precious and endangered heritage at risk, because since 2021, we've had a number of serious climate hazards in these 4 years. So we are looking for the data to assess those targets. Where is the data? What data is important and what is not relevant? How was the data gathered and by whom? When was it gathered? How has it changed then? How can we demonstrate evidence of the data provenance if it was generated by other sources? And we are looking now in 2025 at the data which is available, for instance, at our colleague Eurostat's website, and we see that we have some data about the most visited sites and monuments, which are one of the key categories in the recommendation, which I mentioned earlier. However, the indicator that we see corresponds to the Wikipedia visits, which perhaps may not be the best ones or the most appropriate ones in relation to our endeavor, which are an indicator as compared, for example, to surveying the cultural heritage institutions directly. Now, because it's a time journey, zoom back to 2020. The year we will never forget, because it's the year we were brutally reminded that the health pandemics still exist and they can stop the world overnight. So what data did we have then? We know now that 1% of GLAMs, of galleries, libraries, archives, and museum workers lost their jobs all around EU27, while the number of companies in the sector increased by 3%. But why was that? Those who were dismissed decided to create their own companies. Did they start their startups? We don't know, because we don't have enough data for deeper insights. Another jump in time, in 2015, this time, the year, or the most recent year, when Eurostat asked citizens about it, they found that 15% of EU citizens visited museums at least 4 times a year, while 70% did not visit any, not even once. But why? Well, 15% of them said it was for financial reason, and 7% because they had no museums in the neighbor. So when we look back at 27, we know that 1 in every 7 people in the EU may have been interested in the digitalization of museums, and therefore 1 out of 7 people could directly benefit from the digitalization of museums. Now, because it's a time journey, back to the present. I want you to tighten your seatbelts. We are 11 November 22. So we are less than 3 years from the first big review of the recommendation. And we see, and we have to provide data. We have to provide the achievements. 1 year has passed since the adoption of the recommendation. So how do we get from today to 2025 with the homework done? 2025, it's an important intermediate milestone for us. We need data. We need data about cultural heritage institutions, about their digital transformation, and their engagement and satisfaction. We need data about the visitors, both in person and online. We need data about the reusers of the data, given the huge emphasis on the reuse aspects of the data space for cultural heritage. We need ways to find rewarding ways to collect the data, rewarding for the people who will be answering, who will be offering tools for the cultural heritage institutions to assess themselves and therefore help them back. We need to coordinate the gathering of existing data along a set of interoperable indicators. We need to find statistics at national level, at regional level, at institutional level, at EU level, obviously, and outside. And this is important because it will give us a richer picture of the digital transformation, as well as deeper insight on what's going and on the gaps that we need to cover. And where good quality data allows, we might as well consider composite indicators. So we also need to document the no data, where the gaps are. It's not only about covering the gaps, it's also about documenting the no data. And as I said also at my speech at the European Annual Conference in The Hague, it says also about what we can do for the environment. So it's also about collecting environmental friendly data. We need to achieve these representative and useful results across the EU. And we need to establish baselines in a more coordinated way to gather all data so that it can be repeated and performed over and over again and compared between exercises. And of course, remember, to be comparable, indicator must be strongly defined and not modified. So it's the same approach that we will be using today and in 25 and again in 2020, which is our overall target. So obviously, we cannot have a successful data space without good quality data. And I think Harry will go deeper into that. And we cannot have it without well-documented data acquisition processes. So that's why we really need to establish such processes and indicators to discuss now and use them in a coordinated way across the member states and across for the benefit of cultural heritage institutions, so that they see the value in collecting the data and making it available. So this is what I had to say, that the data aspect is important, is core in many, many ways. And it will be an important discussion as we go forward. So with this, let me thank you and hand back the floor to Hannah. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. As always, the passion. I love it. Thank you. Good. With that, I am pleased to next up welcome Harry Verweijen, who is the General Director of the Europeana Foundation, who will set the stage for how the act of measuring itself actually increases our ability to make progress. Harry, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you, Hannah. If you can see me and hear me, welcome everyone. Big thanks to Mr. Profant and to Rihanna for introducing this, and thank you also very much the authorities and the ministry in the Czech Republic. I think we're on a very interesting journey at the moment. If I can have the next slide. We are moving from an infrastructure that Europeana used to run to something different. And that something different is a data space. And the picture you see in front of you here tries to simplify that a little bit. We'll be part of a much larger constellation of data spaces with the aim to build a decentralized ecosystem of data that can be useful across Europe and beyond for citizens, businesses, creatives, and so forth alike. So it is a very timely moment, as Rihanna already said, to start thinking about, okay, how do we measure progress here? Next slide. The statement here is no data space. Obviously, that refers primarily to the data about cultural artifacts that we've assembled over the past 12 years together. This has been a very large endeavor with the European Commission, the community of actors and cultural heritage institutions and the member states together. And we've collected a lot of data. Currently, I can tell you, as of today, this is from a live API, we have 54,559,490 data items. Now, that is, of course, an interesting indicator. It indicates that we have a lot, and I can also tell you that most of that is in the public domain, over half, and almost 75% of that is reusable in legal terms. So that gives us some interesting indicators of the amount of data available. And as Rihanna already mentioned in the recommendations, and I put a link in the chat here, we are also committing ourselves, we, the member states, we, Europeana, we, European Union, to get more of that data in highest possible quality so that it can be reused across Europe. However, and I think this is the main point I want to make, I think we need a more complete dashboard of indicators than perhaps we've used in the past. Next slide, please. And I think it's important to relate that back to the mission of Europeana. So the mission we are on is to support the cultural heritage sector in its digital transformation. And all of that we do because we believe that that work will lead to a more open, more knowledgeable and creative society, hopefully the society that Mr. Profant was referring to earlier on. I'm a big believer in that. But we need to break that down. Next slide, please. We've attempted to come to some form of a working definition of digital transformation that would help us in our work. Next slide. And the most important element to me is that we're defining digital transformation not only as the result of our work, which in this case would be a lot more data, but also the transformation of how organizations work, because fundamentally that's where we think the biggest impact will be, and data by itself is just data. Next slide, please. So that already gives a broader definition of the work that we're doing. We also believe that everyone can be an agent of change. And I don't want to skip over this too lightly. It means that it's not only decision makers, directors that have a role to play here. It's really the change makers in organizations that we need to focus on. And how do we upskill them to become, create the organizations that we really need in the Europe of the future, of 2025, as Rihanna said. So it's really about mindset, personal capabilities, skills we need to bring into the equation. Next slide. And finally, impact is a diffuse thing. Some changes that are needed in big museums are not the same things that we'll need in smaller libraries or archives. So we also need to encompass that into our dashboard of the future. Next slide. So just to highlight a little bit, the journey we're on. I was investigating a little bit what worked in the economy. So all of us know the gross domestic product, the GDP, as an indicator for economic development. So if you read into that history, you'll see that it's fascinating how it worked. So apparently in 1934, GDP as an indicator was developed by a statistician in the United States, Simon Kushner. And he made it popular, but it only became mainstream after 1944, when Europe and the world recovered of the World War. And GDP, the total amount of goods and services sold, provided a really good indicator for what was then the most important thing to measure. How do we recover economically from that devastating war? However, criticists will have looked at this and said, well, the GDP was never meant as an indicator of development. It was really meant as an indicator of comparison. And it also doesn't show, for example, many things that do create value, like domestic work, for example. And it doesn't take into account all kinds of externalities, as they're called in statistics, like, for example, CO2 emissions that are needed to create the goods and services that we sell. So we're moving, and I think we need to move very fast, personally, from seeing the GDP as the single only determining indicator of economic progress towards something else. Please, next slide. And I think we're all aware that GDP is not the sole indicator anymore. We're also looking at the social development indicators from the United Nations, the SDGs, and many others. I think this week, of all weeks, we're very aware of metrics like carbon emissions, the 1.5 degree increase we're facing. So we've got a whole new dashboard in front of us. I think it's in that light that we also should see our symposium today. Next slide, please. As I said, the amount of data and the quality of that data and the frameworks around that are critical for a data space. There will be no data space without data, the content that we have, and we need to measure that and the progress. And all of that will need to be done. And note, not but, next slide, please. We'll also need to develop a more complete dashboard. And that, to me, is really what we're trying to achieve today. And I'm extremely interested and I'm delighted that we have so many great speakers that we've been able to invite here today to enlighten us on what else is going on in the world of data collection. So I'd like to leave it at this as an introduction. I wish you a fantastic morning, and let's see where we get to. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. As a devout market researcher, measuring what matters and whether it matters and whether you can measure it's so crucial to think about. So good. Next up, we are going to hear in various lightning talks from 3 different people who are collecting data in our sector. They're using, they're learning, and they're teaching from that data in many cases. In a moment, you'll hear from all 3 of them. The videos are pre-recorded, so you can just sit and listen. First will be Professor Pille Poelman-Fingerveld. Professor Pullman-Fingerfeld is a professor in media and communication at Malmö University. Her research interests have focused around cultural citizenship and participation, and specifically engagement in museums, libraries, and public broadcasting. She has also worked on the topic of internet users and social applications of new technologies. She's currently the International Director of the European Media and Communication Doctoral Summer School there at the university. Recent projects have focused on questions of new and emerging technologies, youth participation, and museum engagement. Next up, we'll hear from Professor Frederik Truijn. Professor Truijn is professor at the Faculty of Arts at the KU Leuven in Belgium. He publishes on digitization, photography, and e-learning. His research interests are mostly related to digitization and publishing of cultural heritage. So right there. He's involved in projects on open educational resources and open learning, and on digitization of cultural heritage. He's also involved with the digital humanities photo archives and collections, as well as databases and web portals for the cultural heritage sector. And then wrapping up our lightning talks will be Ms. Cristina Paberza Ramireza. Ms. Paberza Ramireza is Member Engagement Officer at the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, the IFLA. She works with organizations around the world to create the library map of the world, which is a source of country-level library statistics and information about the library field in each country. Also, stories about library programs are included in that library map, which contribute as to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, which Harry just mentioned. So really, let's tie in there. Christine's passion is impact, and how do we evaluate impact? So with that, I am going to ask our coordinators to run the lightning talks.
Hello and good morning. I'm really sorry that I can't be with you, but my name is Birla Brodmann-Wengerfeldt, and my task this morning is to give you a short provocation about how we can think about digital transformation from the perspective of impact and data. I'm professor in media and communication with Malmö University and a visiting researcher at Estonian National Museum. So to start off with the discussion, I would really like you to start thinking about the impact of digital transformation. And my argument is that it's not an easy task, because what happens is that we are so used to counting and considering the inputs that are needed for digital transformations. We're thinking about the machines, we're thinking about the time, we're thinking about the people. We do plan and carefully consider the activities that need to be done, the digitalization process itself, but also the storage space and where we have these kind of things. And we are concerned about outputs. How large of a or small of a proportion of materials we have successfully digitized can be often considered a measure of success or failure for culture and creative industries. However, our argument is that instead of considering the outputs, we need to figure out how we can consider the impacts. What kind of impact does digital transformation have for the cultural industry, but also for the people around it? So me and my colleagues from a Creative Europe project, MeMind, would like to urge you to think about the metrics. How can you better understand and measure the impact that digital transformation has had for the people, not necessarily for the funders or for the people who have urged you to start up with this job, but also for the audiences, for the beneficiaries of the whole thing. So thinking about and creating metrics that can be smart, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time limited can help to understand how can we move away from the digital transformation understanding that is less about how much has been digitized and much more about how the digitized materials are being used. So consider questions of findability, accessibility, and usability as paramountly important questions when we consider, are we succeeding with a digitalization project or not? So what we really think is that digital data needs to be there for the conversations. It needs to inspire people to talk about heritage, to think about heritage, and it needs to have clear value for the people. And that, of course, is tricky because people rarely think about what is missing from the day and think, oh, I would really benefit from a digitized cultural heritage object. So it's the task of the organization to really think about how we can use that digitalization initiatives that we are engaging in to spur solving some kind of social problems and addressing the needs of audiences and beneficiaries. And for that one, we propose a culture and creative industries impact canvas that you can find from the MeMind project homepage. And on that impact canvas, the discussion needs to start with the point of audiences. Who are the people for whom we are doing this? And what kind of beneficiaries these audiences might bring with them. So for instance, if we are doing digitalization projects for teachers, then the beneficiaries can be their pupils or students. But it's not enough to think about who we are doing this for, but we really need to think about what kind of social challenges our digitalization project addresses and what kind of needs our audience segments have. So the digitalization can be, or digitalized cultural heritage materials can be, solution to our audience problems, but we cannot start our thinking, or like we often do, from the perspective of the heritage organization itself. So what is unique about our canvas is the idea that you need to think and plan your activities together with thinking about the impact. What kind of impact it has, how do we measure that impact, what kind of data we need to understand for our impact, and where do we get that data? If we've done that, the digitalization and digital transformation will have a chance to be meaningful in a completely new way.
Hello, I'm Fred Truijen from KU Leuven in Belgium, and I'm happy to talk to you about the efforts that we did in the Horizon 2020 Indices project on self-assessment for cultural heritage institutions. Now, we did an overview of existing surveys like the former Enumerate surveys and different local and national surveys and self-assessment tools for the sector. And what we noticed is that they focused mostly on the core digitization process. So it starts from the digitization of collections and planning for that, often from even a preservation perspective. And what we wanted to do is to bring something new to the table and look at the full digitalization cycle for the heritage institution. Namely, what are you going to do with these digitized collections, and how will these digital collections have an impact on your whole workflows and the way you pursue your mission? And we wanted to see also in how digitized collections could be used in such a way that they contribute to cultural production, that they can help the creative industries, but also the citizens to participate. And we based this on the research of our colleague and project member Pier Luigi Sacco and his team, who developed this theory about the different modes of cultural production, coming from culture 1.0, the well-known era of patronage, where in fact an elite is deciding what should be valued, what is art, what is heritage, what should be preserved, what should be taught to children, etc. So that is in fact the patronage, which existed since the beginning, but which still persists today. There are still curators in a museum who decide on what comes into the collections. But of course, with the industrial age came also what we call culture 2.0, namely the mass production of and the mass copying and digital reproduction of cultural assets, and which we can call culture 2.0, where we have the Netflixes of this world, but also all these social media platforms and all these streaming services, etc. The music labels, so everything that distributes at large scale copied content. Third aspect is then, and that is the newer evolution, is culture 3.0, where there is a real productive engagement of part of the audience, where there is interaction, where there is co-creation, where there are new derivatives created on the basis of this cultural heritage and art, and that is what we call culture 3.0. And of course here you find the social media and also these platforms on online digital creation. And from that perspective, to strengthen a bit, because these modes of production coexist, and to strengthen a bit this movement of participatory practices, we theorized a lot on what kind of impact could heritage institutions then pursue in this area. How can it redefine their mission by using their digitized collections to have a societal impact on these communities for welfare and well-being? I think everyone agrees that exposure to heritage, and also natural heritage, of course, is beneficial for your feeling of well-being, but also social cohesion, and specifically for libraries and museums, the learning society, their place in teaching culture and feeding it into new generations, and how it can contribute to build these heritage communities with taking into account the changing social constellation in Europe. Here another visualization of the same, where we think that digital strategies should of course still do the digital workflow in which you want to digitize your collection. So you need to build capacity with your staff, and you're training your staff for these new digital tasks. And then once you have these collections, you understand that they can become assets to pursue your mission. If we want then look to culture 3.0, we start from taking the community seriously, starting from their co-creation and giving them a voice in selection and curation. And this means that instead of only training your staff, you will also train the audience. You will train the communities and empower these communities to become culturally productive and to become themselves safeguards of their heritage. And it's only then that we are in a culture 3.0 regime where we focus on sustainable development. So a large part of the questions that we integrated in the Europeana Enumerate survey, the latest version, are targeting these kinds of questions and aspects. Here's some findings. You see that for this whole range of tasks, many institutions indicated that at least they are making plans, so they are building plans to do so. They do not always have a public document published on this, but they try to integrate it in the whole of their organization. So these are positive signs, but there is still a large margin for Europeana to work on this and to stimulate institutions to actually monitor how they perform on all these aspects. And when you look deeper into the detail of the survey, you will see that the newer things, like how does it impact our stakeholder engagement? Can the digital help us to develop partnerships, etc.? How does it relate to the environmental position of the institution? These are things we can still really work on, and that's why Europeana is now making this huge effort on this impact framework. And this means that we looked at what are the data that the CHIs themselves normally collect, and we now want to train them to broaden these and to self-assess what they are doing on cultural participation, because we think that their current data in these institutions are in fact not fit for purpose. And this connects also to our research findings, namely that during COVID, the number of followers increased substantially, and due to the rush to the social media, to the websites, to the digital platforms, but that on the other hand, the fraction of people who really interact and this core group of contributing people from the public is diminishing since there is such a growth in followers. You can find a lot of our conclusions in the deliverables and the publications we made from Indices, like this policy analysis of these value chains that I'm certainly happy to share with you. Thank you for your attention, and I hope this has been contributive to your discussions.
Hello, I'm Christine Pabars Ramirez, IFLOS Member Engagement Officer, and I'm here to talk about the library map of the world and some of the work that we do around data and evidence. In the library map, you will find different types of data across different content types that we have, library statistics, country profiles, and SDG stories. In the library data, you'll find statistics on few basic library metrics, such as the number of libraries, those providing internet access, numbers of library staff and volunteers, users and visitors, as well as library loans. And currently we have 136 countries on the map, some being able to provide full data set on what we look for, while others are starting their library map journey with being able to just provide the number of libraries. Country profiles, currently 29, they provide more comprehensive information about library environments in each of those countries. And once a country profile is open, contextual data is added to those library metrics, providing more information about existing contexts in which libraries operate, such as the information infrastructure in the country, poverty and employment rates, knowledge and skills, literacies and innovation. In SDG stories, we look forward to include outcomes data and impact evidence, demonstrating the value that libraries are bringing to their communities and people's lives in the context of sustainable development. Submitting data to the library map increases the profile of libraries in each of those countries that participate, but it also allows for international analysis. And here is just one example of such, our Library Stat of the Week series from 2020, something that has been possible only because of the availability of this data. However, I must say that the collection of library data remains to be uneven from country to country and from region to region. And that's why in our statement on open library data, we call to make resources available and ensure the comprehensiveness of data collected, to ensure that there is funding for such data collection, and once collected, that it's made available and published according to FAIR principles, meaning that it is free, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. But back to the SDG stories. We now have SDG stories for all 17 SDGs, and this proved to be true that libraries are contributing across the board, and the reasonable number of those targets refer to the importance of access to information and knowledge, but also to the importance of library services that they provide towards the digital transformation, such as skills development, access to technologies, enhancing the use of ICTs in general, or safeguarding the cultural heritage. But the challenge is that the existing framework of SDG indicators not always allows to demonstrate the real contribution that libraries are making. For example, the current indicator for SDG target 11.4, which is about protecting and safeguarding the world's cultural and natural heritage, looks only at spending on museums, archives, and monuments, and does not include libraries. And I think this is we need to do something about it, and this is also an opportunity for us to come up with better indicators, our own indicators that would complement the data that is already available. So a few weeks ago, IFLA released a statement on evidence for sustainable development. And we are now halfway in the 2030 agenda. The past years have been challenging to all of us as the pandemic slowed or stopped or even reversed progress in many areas. But at the same time, I think we all experienced so much of what can be achieved by using all digital. And as we will move forward, we will have to make sure that our actions are as effective as possible. And this applies as much to our strategies and actions as to measurement and evaluation. And we might all know very well why we do things, the contexts, or what we do, meaning the services and projects. We are experts of monitoring and counting, meaning providing and producing numbers. But so what? How can we better understand what is the value that libraries deliver to our communities? And what proved to be true based on SDG stories from the map is that the impact on digital transformation is different from one organization to another and from one project to another. And this is because our contexts and our communities are unique and different. Be it a digitization center in Singapore, who provided training and employment for people with special needs, and all of this while implementing a digitization project, providing access to thousands of digitized pages, or a specialized library in India that created collections that helped to increase the research output of their community. They all took a broader perspective in answering so what. So no matter how we define, no matter how we define the community, I think the question from which we need to start is looking what is the value we bring to that community and what is the meaning that we bring to our people's lives. So what is the question for me from which I think we should start planning for impact, and knowing what we will want to achieve will also help us to measure it. Thank you, and let's keep in touch.
Some marvelous food for thought from three people who have lots of ideas about indeed measuring and what the impact can be and how that changes. I just to riff on one thing that Christina just said is the idea of what, which is the data, of course, and then so what, which is what she pointed out. And then the next step is always, okay, now we've what and so what, now what? Coming up next, we have what I think is going to, I'm really excited about it, what I think is going to be a terrific panel discussion. The panel discussion will be led by two of my colleagues. One is Fiona Mowat, who is very involved with the Enumerate self-assessment tool that we were talking about just before the break, and as well as data very generally. And then we also have Nicole McNeely, who is all about impact. So they are both terrific. I think you're going to enjoy hearing from them, as well as all the panelists whom Nicole and Fiona will shortly introduce. So I'm going to hand it over to Fiona and Nicole. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and welcome to everyone who's here today. It's fantastic to see so many new faces, as well as some friends and peers. Welcome. So my name is Nicole, and I am the Impact Advisor at Europeana Foundation, and that means I work across impact, all things impact across the initiative as well. And it really is an honor and a milestone that we're here today. So I'm super happy to kick off our panel and our discussion. I'd like to say thank you to the speakers that we've heard from who are not able to be here today, but it's really fantastic that we have these perspectives to build on. And we know that we can't solve all the challenges today. We can't even map out all the challenges today, but we are starting the conversation and we are starting it well. So we've heard some really interesting perspectives already today from Andre about transparency, openness, promoting understanding and accessibility, from Rahana about the value of hearing from the heritage institutions themselves to the need for interoperable data, from Harry about presenting this richer, fuller dashboard, from Pila about using data to inspire audiences, and from Fred using Culture 3.0 framework to empower audiences with heritage. And from Christina on how we have to try to make sense of such a diversity of contexts, of data collected from institutions where each context is so different. And so now I'll present a question that follows on to help us kick off for this panel today, which is, how can we work together to paint the full picture of digital transformation? And how can we do this in a way so that the painting itself, the collecting of the data, is rewarding for all involved? And I really like this analogy of painting a picture. My apologies to everyone I've had discussions with so far, and I've talked about this picture quite a lot. But you can't create a landscape picture without many different parts, from the rose bush in the foreground to the mountains in the background to the lake around which it all centers. And you can think of the data that we need to paint this picture of digital transformation in the same way. For example, Europeana's data might be the tree to the left or the right, depending how you're looking, of the frame. Member states might provide all the richness in a meadow full of wildflower, and national institutions, each of the birds in the sky. And so I now hand you over to Fiona to take you forward from here. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, I never get bored of your analogy about the picture, so don't worry. No, and I think it's a really useful analogy because, I mean, we were starting the Enumerate project again this year, and that was a project to collect data from cultural heritage institutions across Europe to get perspectives. And what we found out when we started looking at the data that's already out there is that there is already quite a lot of data gathering activities going on. So one thing that's really important is to see how we can work together with those other initiatives, so that we're not asking the same people to give us the same information over and over, because that obviously leads to the fatigue of the audience. So yeah, what we found is that some of the questions that were asked in previous Enumerate, which is the first lot was more than 10 years old now, we found that they weren't quite relevant for today's situation. And also, we're not just thinking about today, as Rahana said, you know, we're thinking about the future, quite a few years' time. What are the relevant questions that we want to answer? And so therefore, what kind of data should we be gathering now? And we worked with the Indices project, as Fred outlined in his lightning talk. And we're working there to try to think about putting the people in the picture and think about what kind of data we should gather that can really help to see what people are doing with digitized collections, not just simply measuring that. And collecting data, that's not so simple, I think, but analyzing it can be very difficult as well. And I'm a data analyst. I forgot to introduce myself like that, but yeah, so I'm actually working as a data analyst. I really like working with data. And when we got to the actual analysis part, that was also difficult because people don't all speak the same data language, and we're not all collecting the same or compatible indicators. So if you want to look, for example, at what's a large institution, some data collecting activities might consider a large institution to be an institution with many staff members. Others might consider that to be an institution with a big budget. Others might be thinking that an institution that has a vast collection. So that's just an insight into some of these issues that we've discovered, and that we would really like to work together with you to think that through. And so I hope that we'll be posing some questions to the panel, and I hope that, you know, we'll get a really interesting discussion that will help us all work together in the future. And back to you, Nicole.
Super, thank you, Fiona. So yes, we have some interesting questions for the panelists. First, we'll introduce them and then each will present themselves for around 5 minutes and what they're working on. So first, we'll hear from Katerina Mottogiani, who is the Policy Officer for Digital Cultural Heritage at the European Commission's Directorate General for Communication Networks, Content and Technology. So she's working with the digital transformation in cultural heritage sector and the Common Europeana data space for cultural heritage. She has been involved with Europeana in different roles since it started in 2018, as well as policies and projects for digitization and online access to cultural heritage material, both at the European Commission and also in the Greek Ministry of Culture.
Thanks, Nicole. Next, we have Olga Tikhonova. Olga was born in Kiev and she's based in Vienna. She's the head of strategic development at Museum Booster, a Vienna-based team with a focus on the strategic advancement of museums and cultural institutions through digital transformation and organizational innovation. Currently, she's a research curator of the Future Museum Practice-Based Research Project, designs incubation program for the Horizon 2020 DOORS, that's the Digital Incubator for Museums project, and is reconceptualizing the Museum Innovation Barometer.
Super. And then after that, we'll hear from Nadia Markova-Prajsova. Nadia is the founder and CEO of Muse Impact, the Czech company Muse Impact. And she's active as a consultant working for and with the museum sector. She collaborates on international projects and works with partners to achieve the highest impact that museums can have for society. She has also served as a leading expert for the Czech Republic's national strategy for the cultural and creative sector, as developed by the Ministry of Culture.
Thanks. And then we have Agatha Krawczyk. Agatha is the head of the digital cultural team in the Polish Ministry of Culture and National Heritage. She's involved in numerous projects in the area of digitization of cultural collections. A graduate of cultural studies, philosophy, and intellectual property law, with a background in editing and cultural projects coordination. She's the representative of Poland in the Commission Expert Group on the Common European Data Space for Cultural Heritage.
Fantastic. So we have a really great panel. And so I think we hand over now to Katerina. Thank you so much. Great to have you here.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here today and participate in this panel on this very interesting topic. And I think you both have summarized it very well. We've heard very interesting speakers giving different perspectives. It's all about how do we bring everything together and move forward. So on our side of the Commission, as you have heard, our main policy framework is the recommendation on a common European data space for cultural heritage that was adopted last November, so a year ago. So,
sorry, Katerina, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
We can't hear you so well. Is it okay if you, yes.
So our main policy framework at the moment is the recommendation on a common European data space for cultural heritage, which was adopted a year ago, last November. And it invites member states to accelerate digitization and preservation efforts, and also to seize the opportunities of digital transformation for cultural heritage institutions in order to pave the way for the space for cultural heritage. And there are targets. You also heard about it from we are inviting member states to set their own specific targets for digitization and preservation of cultural heritage at risk, the most sensitive monuments and sites, and for assets from under-digitized types of cultural heritage. And we're also asking them to set targets for upskilling and reskilling professionals. And this is following also the concept, the overarching policy of the digital decade, the Commission's vision for the digital transformation of the European Union by 2030 to empower our people and businesses, and the targets set in it for 2030 with some intermediate checkpoints in 2025. So we're asking member states to report on progress with implementation of the recommendation and its targets In fact, we're asking them to do that every 2 years. So the thing is now, it's not only about the targets for digitization, but also it's also the values. So the thing is, how do we move from the cultural heritage institution data to member states data, and from that to a European order of data? And the other point I wanted to raise is that we don't start from scratch. And already there was a previous recommendation from 2011, and many of you have worked on that, and you're familiar with that. And it was on digitization, online accessibility, and digital preservation. And there, member states also had to report every 2 years on progress with implementation. And if we look at the member states' reports from 2013, 2015, and then 2017, we see that there was significant progress in the monitoring processes at national level from one report to the next. And more member states reported centralized monitoring schemes at national level or at regional level. Some of them reported even having systems in place for the collection of digitization data and even for the automated collection of digitization. So it's interesting to see where member states stand with those systems now, because the next report is later on. And the other thing we heard in 2017 is that the vast majority of member states encouraged and supported their institutions to take part in the enumerated survey for establishing this European overview of digitization statistics. And member states felt that this was valuable to their country and their cultural heritage institutions. So I think this is something also that we need to see how we learn from it, and how the process for the collection of those statistics work, and take advantage of the lessons learned. And of course, we have all the EU-funded projects working on that now, working on so DOORS, AIMPES is working on monitoring and following the digital transformation of the cultural heritage institutions. So yes, so how do we bring together the existing data in a meaningful way? How do we broaden also the scope, for example, to include data from monuments and sites and the territory digitization that has not been monitored so far? So how do we join the dots? How do we move forward? So I think this event can indeed launch a coordinated effort across member states and all stakeholders to collect data that are representative, meaningful, and useful, to be able to answer where we stand as we progress with the digitization and the digital transformation. So,
thank you so much, Katerina. And yes, I think we are here to try and join the dots today for sure, and at least start joining the dots. And I'll also then next introduce Olga. You heard already Katerina mentioned the DOORS project, and Olga is one of the masterminds behind this. Very happy to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you, Fiona, for the invitation. I'm really humbled to be here and happy to be here. And I also feel very at home talking after Katerina. I feel I'm like one of the dots in your beautiful constellation. So just as a matter of introduction, I'm part of the Museum Booster team. So we're a Vienna-based organization that, as you can tell from the title, works more specifically with museums. So we have quite a focus identified in our practice. And our collaboration and sharing is the default setting for us as a team. So we do put a lot of effort and thinking in terms of building relevant collaborative modalities and modes for shared learning with and from each other. DOORS is one of the manifestations of and one of the projects that we're working on. So maybe as a lineup for the conversation that will hopefully flourish today amidst the panelists, I just wanted to say that I do think that the culture sector is slowly becoming aware of how the digital shift changes the nature and the delivery of institutional work. And when we talk specifically about museums, Ross Perry has beautifully put it that digital has changed the idiom of museum. But still, we harness the fruits of the digital development, but we also still need to acknowledge that as a sector, we are quite struggling to take the collective advantage of digital. And so it is a question of how do we develop the interfaces and the frameworks in which we could do it better? How can we collaborate in a healthier way? And how can we be a little bit more sensitive and sensible towards each other, not only towards our audiences as well? If we talk about the Doors, because it cropped up more prominently in the introduction, so Doors is the digital incubator for museums, and it's a project that was designed and born out of a sisterhood of 3 organizations, which is Museum Bus, Ars Electronica in Linz, and Axide, the European Network of Science Centers and Museums, and it has been generously sponsored and supported by the Horizon 2020 project. So it does tell us a little bit about our approach and principles. So despite digital being extremely prominent in the title, we are rather focusing on the underlying strategies and the value change rather than the technology itself, and how the institutions can build different value propositions. And I think it comes also from from the research that us as a consortium and individual institutions have been active in the field in conducting the studies before, that we have to acknowledge that there is also more innovation in the technologies that are available to the museums rather than in the processes to which they are applied to. And so we need to rethink how exactly are we working and what technology can be more relevant depending on what institutional change do we want to bring. How do we frame our missions, and then how do we build up a practice that aligns with that? And transformation and change feels very uncomfortable. That's a human psychology, right? So transformation and change are feeling quite uncomfortable for most of us. That's not our natural setting. And therefore, we do acknowledge in our practice that we need to invest time to put into framing conversations and tools that prepare people for the exploration of those potentially uncomfortable insight and a growth mindset rather than a fixed one, so that you're ready to learn rather than you are in a defensive position and you're trying, to come back to your comfort zone. It's not always an easy task. And what Museum Booster does as a team, and what I particularly do is when designing programs, is I'm trying to be sensitive in working around the digital imagination and the digital courage. This is the practice, and I'm quoting here Dr. Sophie Frost because it's her beautiful wording and this is her beautiful brainchild. But I do think that beyond just building the capabilities and digital confidence, we do have to build also this digital courage, and it pretty much stems from the space that we build between each other as practitioners and between each other's institutions and the audiences. So there is a very strong necessity of acknowledging the human aspect of digital and what it does to us. I guess that would be my little intro for today, and I hope we will talk about it a little bit more in the panel.
Thank you so much. The point you made about investing time into exploring these topics, I think, is really important. We'll also come back to much more of what you mentioned. But I also like that between Olga and Katerina, we have a new analogy. Maybe we're thinking dots in the constellation, stars in the constellation, instead of this painting the picture, which is good because everyone's tired of that now. So let's see what new analogy we get next. And if you give me 2 seconds, I'm very happy.
We can be just stars, on top of your meadow.
Exactly. I think everyone here is a star, so obviously to be the corny, flatterer, but absolutely. I'm very happy to invite Nadia to the floor.
So, thank you for inviting me to this interesting session. And I'm very honored to be here with you. And because I consider myself as a practitioner, I would like to briefly present you 3 specific different approaches to working with data in order to improve the internal efficiency and services of museum and eventually enhance the relevance of the institutions. So if you let me click on the session. Oh, sorry. So sorry, I have to request the control. So now. Sorry, I cannot get. Oh, okay. Great. Thank you. So I think a museum is a great place to have fun, relax, learn and work, and place to feel happy. Yet I think there are a number of things that need to be changed in museums so that can bring their maximum to people or to society. However, if we wish to change the system effectively, we need to understand the real-life relationships and processes. So there are a variety of parameters of museums activity we need to analyze to get data. They include, as you well know, 4 primary areas. It's acquisition and other areas of scientific work, it's collection management, it's museum communication, and finally, it's institutional activities. Oh, sorry. I'm not able to click on the slides. Okay, it takes a minute. I have to breathe and click once more, I heard. Okay, so what I always look at is the relationship between people and items. This raises questions about the primary reasons for making collections accessible. Is it the interest of the public, or rather, is it the need to prevent losing the continuity of knowledge about the collection once the curator leaves, so that the other colleagues in the museum, as well the members of management and the founder, know what they are working with and what the museum collection consists of, which ideally should be a single-click job. Single-click job. Okay. I was very happy to be, or very lucky to be there for the process of brand new museum being set up from Ministry of Culture. The name of the museum is Museum Plus, and it's located in Ostrava city, what is very east part of Czech Republic. And it's a former coal region aiming to rebuild and reuse former blast furnaces for the museum building. And it's a strategical project of the region aiming to be financed from Just Transition Fund. From the very beginning, Museum Plus has been designed as an institution with a sustainable implementation of digital agenda. Already the site survey and documentation stages were carried out using a 3D system, scanning system, LIDAR, which not only saved funds, but also provided better information for project planning, for presentation of the future plans, or for preparation of the digital twin. As we are aware of the need for relevant data, we also use traditional tool, sociological survey, within the project planning stage. So, a few weeks ago, a questionnaire survey was completed, handling 1,000, sorry, yes, now, questionnaire survey was completed handling a sample of thousands of residents from the Czech Republic and regions of Poland and Slovakia. Thanks to the survey, we have also sourced new and I would say surprisingly data on this goal. May I give you just 2 small examples? It's very interesting that 66 of people are interested in presenting exhibitions in a virtual environment, but at the same time, 63 would like to see it on the site. What is very interesting, people are interested in the offer of a long-term creative stay in the studio based on the scholarship or grant to write a short story or develop a computer game in the museum. Numbers are 40 or 39% of the people who are interested in these things. So these were offerings made by the survey. So it's interesting to see and confirm that despite the abundance of digital activities around us, museums still present places where people desire is also experiencing human contact, view originals, and interact in general. The second example of working with data was the analysis of museums funded by Karlovy Vary region, which is also a structurally affected territory very west of the Czech Republic. And the task was the analysis of potential of free museum, free galleries, and a library for the transformation process. in order to be prepared for developing new projects for Just Transition Fund and looking for impact for culture and creative industries. However, Karlovy Vary region has favorable conditions for digitization. It has top quality network coverage. The ICT literacy of the population is growing, and the museums have not yet embarked on a systemic digital transition. We could see here a lack of IT equipment, staff capacity, there are no specific job roles, lack of the common vision. There are questions what we are going to do with the digitized items. And there is also a hope that there would be a systematic approach to be more effective and sustainable in driving data. So, and the third example is a new private museum called Futureum, placed also in Ostrava. It's a green heritage project. It should be a low-cost museum building, working systematically with data, modeling the processes, functionalities, and features of the National Heritage Sustainable Building in order to save energy and preserve the origin materials at the same time. And this approach, I think, can lead to smart efforts to manage museum facility system. And the Futureum was intended as a testbed, as a laboratory for the museum work. What is interesting, we are now involved in a research project with the company T-Mobile, and we are focusing on the topic, how to use 5G technology for museum work and how to get data. So I think that it's only measuring, analyzing, and finding out the real facts which will make us think about whether the work we are doing brings benefits or not. And I believe that our joint effort should be to produce projects that are transformative, respond to the ongoing digital, social, and green transition, and have the ambition to deliver high added value. So that was all from me.
Thank you so much, Nadia. Oh, sorry.
On you go, Nicole.
Thank you so much, Nadia. You brought up so many things in that presentation, also some fantastic imagery, so thank you so much. Yeah, I think the one thing that really struck me was this, the question of why we want to make this data available, moving away from just making it available for the sake of it, but actually thinking about what changes do we want to contribute to. You mentioned environmental considerations as well, and the need for this to take into account the green transition and much more. So thank you. A lot to cover later. And now we hand over to Agata. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Nadia. Ooh, Agata, we can't hear you. Maybe you're on mute, or I can't see you either, unfortunately.
Okay, is it working
We've
right
got
now?
you.
Sorry,
Yes,
so
perfect.
I started my presentation, so I haven't seen your. Okay, so now I show you my presentation in a bit. So my name is Agata Krawczyk. I work for Polish Ministry of Culture and National Heritage for around 10 years now, and I like to really thank for the invitation today. It's a pleasure to participate in today's panel. So we've heard a perspective of museum and specialist expert researchers, and I'd like to take you to rather another aspect of our work. So what I can, I also like to thank organizer of the event for the choice of the topic, because I believe that this is crucial for whole GLAM sector to continue discussion about data space, while its implementation has just started. So what I want to show you today is that I truly believe that digital transformation is a complex subject. As an effect of transformation culture into digital form, we receive data. We need data to continue digitization of the cultural objects from whole GLAM sector. And when I mean data, I mean that we need data to know how to estimate money, staff, tools to continue the process. So Effects of digitization as a process of scanning 3D projects are also data. So data are really in the center of interest as an effect of digital transformation and an effect of digitization. So that's why I want to focus on data as an effect of digitization today. I will briefly present you 4 sources of data in Poland, as we see on the slide. And while we are discussing data, we need to remember, as we heard earlier, about perspective of the museums, libraries, archives, and also about our end users, like researchers. But today I'm wearing a hat of a policymaker, and as a policymaker, I definitely need data. And when? So I need data when we try to set goals in future digital strategy. We need data when we try to estimate cost of digitization. So we need data when we need to prove our achievements. And why is it? Why we need data? We need data because only with data we can measure effects of our action. Only with data we can describe the impact of financing programs. And then only with data we can provide more targeted support for the whole sector. And as we really need data, there are some challenges around the process, and I would like to go back to it later. So let's start. Official statistics. As we all know, official statistics are very effective. In Poland, official Statistics Poland has been collecting data about digital transformation for some time, with indicators like number of digitized objects, cost of digitization. The system works very well. It is very effective, and data are reliable. And why is it? Because participation in the survey is obligatory. So this is simply legal obligation for the cultural institution. And Statistics Offices is actively cooperating with cultural sector. And I'm very glad that thanks to cooperation with sector and with Ministry of Culture from this year, cultural sector has been awarded with special chapter, which is only about digitization. So now we hope that survey will be annual, and what is very important, everybody has open access to the basic indicators about digital transformation, like number of digitized objects, cost of digitization, and the more detailed one, like because official statistic is presenting information about, among others, about, for example, conservation and digitization of the archival holdings, digitization of library collection, digitization of the resources of institution conducting stage activities. So as you can see, this is really huge source of data, and we are really proud of it. Then what we are doing as a ministry? As a ministry, we've been gathering data for some time already, and we had 2 approaches. First is voluntary. We've been making some service. We started from sending traditional letters. Now we are having electronic questionnaire, and we are repeating our survey once a year or every 2 years. Then there is an obligatory approach, and I must say it's very effective. When we are giving grant money for digitization, we are getting reports, and with that, in that reports, we are having indicators, and it's working very well. So with our voluntary approach, we made some pilot study in 2018, then we repeated it 2021. So thanks to that, we know that more than 12% of objects from cultural institutions are already digitized. This is quite a lot. So why I wanted to explain why we are doing our own surveys as a ministry. So we are doing that because we need tailored data. So these are data tailored to our current needs. Then we are doing surveys because Supreme Audit Office said so. We are getting questions from another ministries, and but the main reason is that we simply need we want to be better in policy making. We need to estimate cost of the digitization, and finally, and more important, is that we are giving more targeted support for the sector. So what is my conclusion? It's easy to gather data while it's connected with money, and it's difficult while we rely on a voluntary response. But what we find of a very good practice from a few years of making those surveys is that one of the most important things, very important, is preparing a list of digitized objects after, for example, every session of funding program. So what I wanted to say that one of the best practice we've seen is preparing a registry of digitized objects. And I have to mention, because we are meeting under a Czech presidency in that we really are a fan of Czech digital database, and we found this as a great example of data gathering. So also we are having great data from the sector. We are talking about museums today, and so I wanted to present you shortly the work of National Institute for Museums and Public Collection. This is also center of this institution is also having a role of center of competences for digitization in museums. They are doing a great annual museum statistic project. The survey is voluntary, but institutions are participating in each edition, and it's working very well. So digitization is only a research area in the museum statistic projects, covers digitization among others. But thanks to that survey, we know that in 2021, over 75% of museum institutions in Poland had digitized objects. Next, I'm not going to present enumerate, but I want just to express that we truly appreciate that international survey like Enumerate are existing, and it's a fantastic source of data. We also know how hard it is to make a GLAM sector to participate. What I wanted to show you is the work we've been doing in Poland with Enumerate. The thing is that in 2017, we made huge work to encourage institutions to participate. We hired special person, we have a coordinator, we were helping institution to take part in the survey this year. And we got 114 answers, as we know. This year we only send letters to maybe not whole, but GLAM sector, and we sent information about Enumerate, and we get 91 answers. So wow, I also didn't know, thanks Fiona and Nicole for the information, that it was the highest number of response in Europe. It's really impressive, I didn't know that. But what I wanted to say is that, and it was really nicely put in this year edition of the Enumerate, that really need to prove our respondents that participation in the survey could be really beneficial for them. So we need more carrots. We need to show our respondents that taking part in the survey can help them to receive more targeted support from their, for example, ministry or another institution. So that was all more or less what I wanted to present today. And what I wanted to mention, and I would love to start discussion about it, is that we really need to remember about ethical approach when we are collecting data. Every time when we decide to ask someone a question, we need to check carefully our background. That will be great to do some search before creating your own survey. There are some helpful questions. Why do I need data? Where could be data I'm searching for? Maybe someone has already asked. So we really need to respect our respondent. We remember that they are having limited time. We need to remember about the diversity of organization, that they are some small NGOs, and there are also huge institutions like National Library. So when we are asking questions, we need to remember not to ask too often. We in the ministry, as I said earlier, we decide that it will be enough to repeat one of our survey, not every year, but with 2-year interval, due to pandemia, due to also to work of official statistics. And when we are searching for data, we always need to look for support of a bigger player in our field. Before start working on our survey, we need to think about partnerships, networking, looking for information, maybe sharing your need among some networks like Europeana network. So if you decide that you need to do your news survey, remember that after your survey, it is great to present your data in open access while it's possible. Remember about the data sharing. And at the end, I'd like to say that with the great help of European Commission, there are 2 big and fantastic initiatives ahead of us. And I believe that it should help with access to data in the nearest future. The first one is data space for cultural heritage. But also, we are looking forward to European Collaboration Cloud for cultural heritage, because we truly believe that the cloud will help to exchange data sets and data, and that will create a great opportunity to collect and share data. So that's all for me. Thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Agatha, thank you so much. That was wonderful.
I'm sorry, it was 10 minutes, but I really wanted to show some examples.
It was perfect. It was really interesting. And I actually wanted to just jump straight in and ask some questions already, if I can. So you made a lot of really good points about why you want to collect this data, and especially about why we should do that in an ethical way. Do you have some tips and some insights into how we can collect this data in a way that's sustainable and ethical and, you know, environmentally friendly as well, potentially, and how we are handling the data?
So if I can start, so I try to give some insight about how to collect, but the first thing will be that we need to search for data we've already had, because there is a huge ocean of data, and for me the first thing will be to invest in data analysts, because this is very often happening that even now I was even then now when I was preparing to my presentation, I found by an accident on Twitter information about fantastic initiative made by Douglas McCarthy and Andrea Valace, and it was really annoying, because I was sometime I was looking for the information about the digital collection in open access in Poland, and there it is. It's already done. So for me, the third thing is hire data analysts and invest in education, in digital skills. That will be the first thing.
Yeah, no,
but I'm really eager to hear about another perspective.
Yeah, that sounds good. And how we can get the data analysts to speak to each other also, so that, yeah, as you say, we're not all.
So this is a power of networking.
Yeah.
And I think that, for example, Katarina, I think that you will also, you also know how it works, that this is really power of networking, that sharing information, as you mentioned in the report, in the national report, it was the first thing is that fulfilling that reports was really hard. And it's a teamwork. We work in a ministry as a team, or I don't know, 5-6 people to fulfill that information. Also, of course, we cooperated with the National Cultural Institution. But then the possibility of comparing the data with another member states was great, was simply great, because we found out that we are having sometimes the same problems, and sometimes that there is already a solution for our problems with gathering data. So I strongly believe that asking question before sending question to your network is it's one of the first steps.
Yeah, perfect. Katerina, would you like to reflect on what Agatha was saying?
Yeah, well, I can only agree with what Agatha already said. It's important to share the results and the data that has been gathered. And I agree with Agatha. I mean, I happen to be following both Europeana DSAG and now the data space and the project DOORS. And at the same time, I got 2 reports looking at the digital transformation of cultural heritage institutions and links, surveys linked to that. So I think there is room for collaboration, for data sharing, and I think there's important work that's being done, and it's also a lesson learned for us at the Commission to maybe also promote more results from our own projects. So
yeah, fantastic, thanks. We just say, yeah, your sound is there's still a little bit of an issue with your sound, Katerina. I don't know if maybe you can have a look, see if your headphones are working or whatever. Olga, you've raised your hand, so would you like to come in and give us a reflection?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on where Agatha started, and thank you for the beautiful summary in this regard. But what crops up in my head is a beautiful quote from a text that is already quite old. It was published in 2018 by Kate Crawford and Vladan Joler. If you remember, about the technology behind Amazon Echo. But I still think it's extremely, extremely relevant when we're thinking about contemporary technology and how we approach it, and data particularly. So they reminded us that each small moment of convenience, whatever it is, be it answering a question, turning on a light, or playing a song, it requires a vast planetary network fueled by the extraction of non-renewable materials, labor, and data. And so the question that I always ask myself, whenever I'm doing, and we're doing as a team, and then as a collaborating projects, we do a lot of research. And so before I start approaching or designing yet another questionnaire, or approaching yet another colleague who I'm dead sure has been approached many more times before I have, how much data do we need, and how many numbers do we actually need, and when do they start showing us something, and when do they actually stop, and we're doing it for the sake of just mounting numbers on top of numbers. And I think when doing the study, we also have to overcome the abstraction of what a number is. So how can we also build up data sets that can be contextualized and context sensitive to the realities of the institutions? And here I would like to refer back to the project that we're doing within the Horizon 2020, the DOORS, which is working with small and medium scale institutions. And that's where just assembling numbers is not exactly always helpful, because the reality those institutions are inhabiting are so specific that you really need to take a step or two back to first imagine a sensitive enough framework to approach the inquiry itself, and then to work together with the institutions to actually, craft a proper question that will be telling you and getting maybe less numbers, but the ones that are actually meaningful. And I think that's the task that we need to exercise as a sector and as a broader, to really reap the fruits of our collective intelligence, to train ourselves to ask more sensitive and more in-depth questions, and to reconsider how many numbers do we actually need in order to derive the learnings from them.
That's fantastic. Yeah, so we collect only the data we need and not extra data. That's really great. I wondered if you also had a reflection, Olga, about how we can give something back to the people who are giving us this data. Do you have any ideas about that?
The first giving back, I think, is even prior to asking, is caring, and acknowledging that I think we are all inhabiting the sector where the reality that we are all overworked and we have a lot on our plates. And so, whenever someone grants sensitivity enough to care so that we are not overburdened, or that, like, to step in our shoes and understand that I always think it's a gift when an institution credits you with time and shares the information. So we have to respect and value that. This is the first thing. So there's designing a proper, again, coming back to Agata's point, we have to be very cautious whom we are asking, why are we asking, and being very, very transparent. What exactly are we planning to do with it? Because the change that happens, in order to change the behavior of people, we also need to change their attitudes. So I think it is about, like, building up this space of trust in between us, understanding why we do, and caring for the outcomes is really, really important. There was a brilliant keynote speech at this year Ars Electronica's festival and the conference Studiotopia. Carmen de Grey was giving a keynote speech, and she reminded a very simple thing to us, that facts themselves, just as numbers and just as stats, do not have motivational power. We do not act upon things because we know they're true. We act upon things only if they're of importance to us, which means that this have to connect to our values and to our emotions. We have to care about things that we know in order to act upon them, because we are flooded with numbers. We are flooded with statistics. And it's not that we don't trust these numbers, it's just that these numbers do not matter to us. So I think it is important for us to build a shared space in the sector and amongst practitioners, so that the numbers we are generating together, the numbers that are required from us, they are meaningful, and we do know how to act upon them. They motivate us. We have a larger goal at the end, and we have a picture, where we're going with this one. So that it's not just a mechanical reporting that we are all trained in, right? We all know how dysfunctional reporting is working. And unfortunately, it still sits it has quite a place in our day-to-day practice and annual reporting system. So how can we reimagine that? I think this is the responsible step that all of us need to take, both as, as respondents, but also the ones who are asking for this data.
Well,
sorry if I'm preaching.
No, I find it so inspiring, honestly. I was wondering, Katerina, maybe we go back to you and you can let us know what you think, and we can see how your sound's doing.
Yeah, I hope my sound is a bit better now.
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
Good. So yes, I think, I'll just like to add to what Olga said. I think DOORS has the benefit of working also hands-on with smaller and medium-sized museums, and they have the opportunity, to get that information and that firsthand. So that's, I think, something that not everyone has, and it's an opportunity that needs to be taken seriously into account. How do we exploit that? How do we benefit from that? And I was thinking of another aspect related to what Agatha said earlier about networking, and in order to the Commission has set up an expert group with member states representatives. Many of you here are part in it, and the idea, of course, is not only for the group to help us monitor, but also it's a forum where best practices can be exchanged. And that has been always the idea behind it. So member states can also share their best practice. We heard from Agatha, I'm sure other member states also have good practices to share. And we could also see as Commission how to better organize this sharing of best practices in relation to data, digitization data as well.
Thank you so much. Nadia, can I bring you in? Do you have a reflection for us?
Yes, I was just thinking about that we also need to educate the people in the museum in this problematic, because it's very, very important to increase the competencies of the people and skills. And because we are now in the time of knowledge economy, and I think there is a wedge between museum people and digital technology. A lot of people don't understand what is going on, and I think it's a very strong task, and we have to do something with it, because that was also this analysis in this Carlo Vevari. The directors asked questions. It's very, very expensive to get data. It's cost us very much money, but also people's time. And we don't know why we are doing that. And this is the question, to have one strategy to inform people, to let them know what are the impacts of the data, so we can think about it, not just on the theoretical level, but we have to think about it more practical and give it to people and educate the people in these tasks.
Yeah, fantastic. So it's not just what data we collect, but why. Why are we doing that? Nicole, I wonder if I could bring you in now. Do you have some questions? I'm sure you do.
Yes. Nadia, what you just left with, this sort of understanding of the digital divide in heritage, in skills and heritage, it also comes back to a question which Marco raised in the discussion, which was this that digitization can lead to higher social inequality, and culture has this reputation of being very high level, a little bit elite, and when we start collecting data and telling stories that are quite abstract from that everyday experience of being in a museum, we have the risk of actually increasing that divide from people engaging with museums and understanding the value of it for them. And again, that brings this discussion into such an important framework, that you start telling stories that can be more meaningful, caring, giving people something they care about. Olga, you mentioned giving something that inspires them. Now I'll get to my question, which I think is Marco's. So how can we prevent this, the collection of this data, our storytelling around impact of digital in our societies or in our institutions? How can we prevent these stories from increasing that gap between the public and the institutions? If that's an easy one. Who would like to come in with that, maybe? Nadia, you're smiling?
Yes, because it's a very, very big task of the Museum Plus activity. It's a new type of the museum, and we would like to make a community museum. And we have to ask from the very beginning, what are you interested in? What would you like your museum, your new museum should do and present? So there are also, I was talking very shortly about these activities. There are some studios, you can make video games, or you can write stories, because you need the collection to make a content. So we are giving you an advice. You can do it in a museum, and we would like to build a creative part of the museum, and you can enjoy collections, and you can be creative and do something. And I mean, it's resonated. So I think this survey was very inspiring and successful, I would say, for us also, that this is the right path we can go on.
Thank you so much. Any other thoughts?
If I may, I'm coming from another perspective, I guess, as I work for the ministry. I think that one of the most important things is to understand why we are asking questions. And from my point of view, I know it quite well. I'm sending a question to the GLAM sector while I need an information. So I need information to improve, for example, digital strategy we are working on. I need some information to understand what kind of infrastructure is needed in the sector. And there are many other aspects of that, but the thing is that we really try to understand why we are asking. And we are trying to be very, conscious about how often we are asking those questions, because we are quite aware that we are, working in a network, and there are many actions going on in one time. There is, for example, ministry. There is official statistics. There are international initiatives like Enumerate and many others. And every time I try to wear a hat, for example, of a librarian who is working not as a data specialist, but for example, he's a part of a team which responsible to digitize books. And there's a question, and there's another question next month, and in 2 months they are getting next question. And I really believe that it could be annoying and difficult and time consuming. And so I truly believe that this is our job to look for that data before we are asking some question.
And I wonder then, Nadia, something you mentioned about this the data collection practice, this involving the public, really resonating with them and in their experience with the institution. And maybe Agata, also for you, for both of you, are we currently, you know, I'm going to come back to painting the picture. Are we painting the picture of digital transformation in a way that actually is meaningful for the public? Does the public understand what the digital transformation of our sector is? And I think this also might come back to Marco's first question, which was on, is this a demand from society? Or, for example, is the Commission and our ministries pushing us beyond actually what society needs from us in terms of digital? Sorry, that might be a controversial question, but it also comes back to also something you mentioned, Nadia, about the physical space still being very important. Are we telling a story that tells both pictures? So, Agata, you have your hand up first. We'll maybe go around everyone for this one. So, Agata.
I think that what your question was a bit about control. And I think that there's a lot of happening, and with digital transformation is happening because of the hard work of the whole GLAM sector. So we cannot control it, and we really enjoy their fantastic activities. They are so different, and that's why it's so hard to have a common narrative and one indicator which will be very helpful. So digital transformation is a vivid live thing, and we cannot control it. But actions like what is, for example, Commission doing, we can nourish it somehow. We can help digital transformation with initiatives like Data Space for Cultural Heritage. So this is kind of a framework. So it's like it's like a tiger in the cage. So I know it's we are giving some support, money is a support, digital skills are important, but we cannot control digital transformation because it won't happen.
Yes, if I may, I would say there are a lot of problems connected with the question, because speaking about public, I would answer we have no data. We don't know in Czech Republic if people would like or would prefer digital institutions at all. I found once a survey on Google, Museums Hack or something like that, and that was about virtual tour in the pandemic time. And that meant that people were interested only for 4 days in virtual tour in museums. So there's really question if that it's true or if it was just activity of museums, they had to do something to bring to be in public. So this is the first thing. The second thing is the digital transition is just not happening on the level of collection and on the displays. It's also happening in order of transformation of building. And what I was told about the buildings, it's nice to show people we can also be more green. We can make storages that are sustainable. What is happening now in Czech Republic, thanks to the EU money, we can build a sustainable depository. So it's also a thing we can say that the digital transformation also, because we have data, we know, and we are working with this green aspect also.
Thank you, Nadia. And you also, something you mentioned also made me think again of IFLA's SDG, the Sustainable Development Goal stories, also as a very important way of framing that narrative of the work we're doing in heritage organizations. I wonder, Katerina, do you have anything to reflect on the question?
I think I'd like to give the floor to Olga at this point, because I think there were very, very interesting insights from the research that was done in the context of the incubation program of DOORS in relation to how institutions, especially smaller and medium ones, feel about it. Then, I mean, I can also contribute a bit after.
Since the ball is in my court, I mean, within the DOORS, we work with small and medium scale institutions, but another project that Museum Booster is doing, for example, such as the Future Museum, where we work with large scale players as Pompidou or Whitney Museum or SF MoMA, you know, and this kind of things. I still think that the question that bridges both domains, you know, as distant as they might appear geographically or scale wise, is that digital transformation is just yet another tool that helps us to understand if I'm working with museums, as you remember, that to tackle the more important question, how do we remain socially relevant institutions in principle? And I think by answering this question, that's where we come back to the ethical aspect of technology. And like in terms of the data, I think it is important to ask the question on multiple levels. How can we shift our focus from technologies of information and data and what motivates these technologies to develop in this direction, rather to those of the world building emotion and imagination? Because if you ask about the relevance to the audiences, they will not pose themselves a question, is this a digitally transformed institution that I'm attending to today? Am I bringing my child to a sophisticated, you know, digital venue? They would be rather asking, does it fulfill a particular role in there, or does it provide a meaningful experience? What do they get? It's basically the question of the well-being of the person and what role the institution is playing in this social well-being of an individual or of a society. So coming back to the data, I think this is again coming back to the question. So what exactly do we want to know, and do we need to know, and how do we build this sensitivity together with our audiences? But also, and I think this is really an important question, together, the people are not only in the audiences, there are also people in the institutions themselves. We also have to be healthy environments for the people working in the institutions so that they build healthy and exciting and inspiring experiences for the people outside the institution who are coming as a visitor. You know, so in a way, the role of the institution is to be able to imagine things otherwise and to fuel, to allow this social imagination. That's why it's important to keep public institutions. And coming back to the quote I mentioned in the beginning, what Ross Perry said, that digital influences the metaphor museum, it also influences it externally, because with the arrival of digital, both as a milieu that we inhabit and as a language that we speak in our daily lives, it affects how people evaluate whether the museum is a relevant institution to them or not, in principle. And I mean, of course, speaking with, it pertains to all scales and all types of institution in principle, not only to the small and medium scale or the large scale. This is the challenge that we are equally facing.
Thank you so much. I'm going to quickly add a couple of things before handing over to Fiona, but Olga, that was very inspiring, and also came back to something that I asked that question as a controversial one, not as my own beliefs, but it inspired very good discussion, and that move towards those meaningful experiences, communicating in a way that shows an audience that the meaning is there. That is about the intrinsic engagement with the institution, moving away from this digitization for its own sake or digital for its own sake, but actually thinking again about the impact, always thinking about the audience, the why we're doing this, the so what question. But we still need the data also. Agatha, you mentioned all the reasons why we need, or many of the reasons why we need the data, you know, the value of comparability, all of these things. And that leads me to hand over to Fiona to maybe talk a bit more in detail about the data.
Thanks, Nicole. Actually, I really wanted to bring in the conversation about indicators here. So yeah, we talk a lot about the data, but and Olga, what you just were saying about the real value, what's the real value? Okay, we want to find that. What do we measure? You know, that's the thing that's really difficult. So we can collect all the data, but how do we know what we should measure? Like, do you have in mind, if we could just quickly go back to you, do you have in mind some specific indicators that can help to measure digital transformation in a way that is actually meaningful to the people in the institutions and maybe also the public, everyone else?
It's of course a tough question, and that's what we're also. No. I mean, realistically, I don't think there is an easy answer to that, and it's a hands-on. It's a journey, you know, where it's learning by doing, and then learning by failing, and then learning better, and fast and learning together. I think one of the aspects that really helps to learn faster and in a healthier way is to do it collectively, collaboratively. So again. What digital allows us to do is to be a little more open and more transparent, and to collaborate more easily if you're open to. But it's not only in the technology itself; it's also in the mindset of the people. If you are willing to work together with others, and that's, I think, coming back a little bit to Agata's comment, that it is about losing control, or like letting go control a little bit. So because if you really want to know something about your audiences, maybe you have to stop making assumptions and to actually ask the audience and to be driven by the audience's input, rather than coming back and falling onto what the museum professionals on the curators think the audiences might eventually appreciate in the exhibition space, or what their requests are for. And that's where, you know, learning from more experiences and being exposed to a diversity of institutions and players is, of course, extremely beneficial. But you'll never know before you ask. And this is another thing, I think, which is particularly in the museum field is a stumbling block, because museums are the institutions of authority in a way, you know, because that's the heritage. We know it's the mark of quality. It is so hard to move into vulnerable zone and to expose that you actually don't know something and that you'd like to learn. And that's where, you know, it's very uncomfortable to be exposed to transformation in a way, and opening up to the audiences. Let's build something together, because we're not experts in this. We do want to ask you, and that's about you in a way. I think there's also another psychological moment where the transformation and being more visitor-centered by means of digital transformation and the tools that are predicated on digital technologies is extremely handful. But it again comes back to reimagining the process and how you approach the question, rather than the technology will arrive that just will solve this issue, so like by pure magic. And that tackles another aspect that I wanted to throw in this regard, that is not directly linked to what you asked, actually, Fiona, but I think is really one of the backbones of the question, is why many institutions feel resistant to digital transformation, is because it also changes the power dynamics within the institutions themselves. Because the digital skills and what digital literacy and digital intelligence requires from you really shifts the dynamic within the classical hierarchy and structures of the institutions. And this is another level of where letting control and allowing more diversity and the growing culture of new approaches to talent management within institutions and within the sector is very disturbing for many people.
Yeah.
And I think that's another dynamics that feeds into the question. So why, as a sector, we're a little bit resistant to, you know, data, digital transformation, and the learnings that we derive from it, because it actually shifts the status quo a lot. And it does take some balls to ask a daredevil question, or to have a look at the facts and then to change in the direction that they're actually showing to you, rather than moving beyond the formal, like we report it and that's it, deal with it on a different level and tell us what to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, transition is changing. So this growth mindset you mentioned before is really important, but that's also quite scary. So yeah, no, it makes sense what you're saying. I don't know, does anyone else in our panel have a reflection on this? Would someone like to come in? Katerina?
Well, I will go back to the perspective of the policymakers. So remember also, I come from a Ministry of Culture before joining the commission. So I think, as Agatha said, for policy making, you need the data, you need the statistics. So for a number of reasons, as Agatha explained very well. So for us, it's more, I would like to turn the question to how do we then try to have those maybe common indicators agreed, so that we pass from the cultural heritage institutions level to a member states level, and then to this European overview. Because I mean, at the Commission, we rely on member states for all the data, and probably member states rely on their institutions and agencies for their data. So I'd like to turn a little bit the question, and I don't know if my co-panelists have some ideas on that.
Katerina, I fully agree, and it could there is this very complicated landscape, and but what I know for sure is that we do not need new indicators or metrics. We are having a lot of them. We can use a lot of standards. Europeana Foundation is working on impact. Europeana is having their own standards. So we really have a lot of support when it comes to indicators. And we are talking about digital transformation. So we are trying to describe something what is happening right now, and it is changing. The landscape is changing every year, and the thing is that we do not know where we are going, I guess. And this is fascinating, and this is really exciting, that we don't know what will happen next 10 years. Okay, of course, we try to describe, to think about our landscape in, as Rihanna explained beautifully today. We have a lot of ideas, but we do not know what will happen really. So there is I think that I have a courage to say that there is no one powerful indicator. We just need to be sensible. We need to understand why we are asking and what we want to do in next step. Yes. So when I'm asking my colleague to gather information about digitized monuments, I have in mind that it will be very helpful for someone, for a church, for a local museum, to have that information online. Was it already digitized? Where I am in the area of digital transformation of, one of the small village. If I have that information online about the digitized object. So I think that on one hand, we are talking about big data, great data source. And on the other hand, there are quite simple, very practical things. So the thing is to understand why I'm asking some question and where is my position, what who is asking the question and what for. But I'm really grateful that we are discussing data in the digital transformation, and I truly hope that it will be possible to continue the discussion, because it's really making sense.
I think, Agatha, to wrap up on your last point, yes, this is hopefully the beginning of a conversation. We've covered a lot of points here, and we know that we cannot do justice to all of them here, but we have a lot to say. I wonder, is there any, in 30 seconds, one final thought from everyone in the panel about going forward? This is not your last moment, of course, conversation continues. 30 seconds. Who would like to go first? Your last contribution to the panel.
I would like just quickly say that the point is to measure efficiency, because it costs public money, We are accountable to the taxpayer, and we should be responsible for managing the finances. So this is also the point why we not need more and more data, but we have to handle it very carefully because of the process of the efficiency.
Fantastic. And that comes back into that reciprocity also by, for those collecting the data, also have responsibilities towards those institutions. Who would like to go next? Thank you, Nadia.
I'd like just to thank the comment, one of the comments in the chat. We need to listen more. I couldn't agree more. And that will be all for me. Thank you.
Fantastic. Olga?
I feel that my role in this conversation is like to be a trigger in a way. And I just wanted to come back to the point. I mean, because I know that the colleagues are just brilliant in speaking about practical things, but I also do think that this digital imagination is really crucial, because where technology can be handy for us is to imagine really different ways of working, and to enable us to imagine the world a little bit otherwise, and to be a little bit more just as we are looking inwards in the institutions and outwards in the audiences. And I wanted to come back to the point that the critical factor in social motivation and social innovation is actually the fact of belonging. So I would really sincerely want to our sector to ask ourselves a question: how can we be better? How can we better collaborate across the sector to craft to really tackle this extremely challenging task? There is no one of us and the other people who will be commenting on that is not able to give an easy answer how to measure it, but it doesn't mean that we don't have to try and to try and try again and try better to craft the approaches that are moving beyond just the numbers and the quantitative, and how can we actually measure the impact that is more qualitative and in-depth. It does demand our collaborative effort.
Fantastic. And on collaborative efforts, Katerina, final thoughts?
Exactly. That was what I was going to say. Collaboration, I think, and really, I hope this conversations today will really launch a more coordinated and collaborative effort. And yeah, so that's it.
Fantastic. And in the spirit of collaboration, I left a note in the chat earlier for our dear audience, everyone there. We are going to do a short interactive exercise. We had planned a break, but we have some time, maybe if you want to all get up and have a stretch. It's time for you to reach for your phones or use your laptop, depending how you're connecting. I'll ask my colleague to share this slide that tells you what to do, and I'll try and find my own phone also.
This is how we support the digital transformation, Nicole.
Yes.
You have to really take part. You have to use your digital device. So
yes.
So we're going to Menti. So that's menti.com. We'll get the slide up in a second. Yep, here you go. You can also scan the QR code and that'll take you right there. So yeah, otherwise go to menti.com in your browser. The code is 2643423. And we also have that in the chat. And yeah, we'll give you a second to stretch. Looks like we have a lot of chat coming in as well. It's really exciting.
I love this comment from Jim that instead of in trying to paint a constable, maybe we end up with a Jackson Pollock. So we can go quite modernist in this, I think, for sure.
Great. Okay, so Nicole and I, we set the scene a little bit before the panel, and obviously you've heard a lot of things today. I hope very inspirational things. I'm very inspired anyway about how we can think about collecting data and measuring this digital transformation. So now we wanted to do a short quiz, and the first question, if you get into the Menti, you'll see it there. The first question is designed to be a little provocative, just to capture your attention. The question is the assessment of the total percentage of digitized EU cultural heritage content. So if we're assessing how much of digitized, of how much of the cultural content in the EU is digitized, is that percentage a good indicator of digital transformation? It's quite a long sentence. Let us know what you think. So, yeah. we've got a maybe. Maybe is coming out as the most popular. I mean, of course, in this conversation we're having for real, we're not just looking at one indicator, of course. So we're looking at all the indicators, and we're going to just discuss a little bit, play around a little bit with some of those specific indicators now and see what people are thinking. So, I mean, myself, I'd probably be on the maybe here for sure. Yes or a maybe. Nicole, what are your reflections here?
Absolutely. I think maybe might have been my answer, because again, it's about, I don't want to use painting the picture anymore. I think we've
stars in the
that.
constellation. That's our new
We're
one.
about connecting all the stars in the constellation, and even the stars have their own little aspects we have to bring in as well. So yeah, it's all about the stars. We're going to wait a little bit because some people are having some trouble connecting.
Let's have a look. I'm going to try it on my phone.
The number is on the top of the screen. You can see now also, and that's 2643423.
Yeah, for me, that code's working. I just tried it. So it works for me. Maybe there's an issue with menti.com. So maybe come out and go back in again. If it's not working for you, let us know.
And we'll wait for everyone to catch up. And here is also another link that might take you to it directly. Thank you to Beth behind the scenes for giving us this.
Really.
There we go. We have some more votes coming in. Perfect.
Maybe we said too much as swayed people. I don't know.
We might have done. Fantastic. So we're on 46, and we know not everyone likes to get involved in these, but we might wait until we hit at least half, and then we know we have a lot of people. And thanks to Fiona also for setting this up.
Oh, I think yes is still lagging behind a little bit. Assessment, by assessment, we mean basically measuring how much of cultural heritage is digitized in general. So measuring or assessing by that percentage, is that a good indicator? Okay, shall we try the next one?
Yes,
yeah,
everyone will
okay.
come along with us. Let's go.
Okay, so please let us know. We've discussed about these indicators, and we've also in the panel, you heard opinions about what the digital transformation could really mean. Please, can you let us know here in fewer than 3 words, what does digital transformation mean to you? Oh, that's a good word to start with, I think. Opportunity, access. Oh, and reuse too. That's one of our key keywords.
Also public access, improvements, new ways of engagement, new thinking. I think it's highlighting that this definition of digital transformation, which we worked on together with our network members, that it's very much about mindsets, it's about people, as well as the 3D imagery also comes up here.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about digital and we think about technologies, but really, you know, people are so important. We don't have those digital services without people. behind the scenes. So we shouldn't paint them out the picture. Sorry.
That is true. There is no, there are no people in my picture. I referred to trees and flowers and a lake. No people, actually.
Yeah.
Next time.
Yeah.
I think the stars constellation works because people are stars, institutions, the people working in them.
Yeah, exactly. So are we ready for the next one?
We have 49 responses. I think we
Yeah,
should be.
We're ready. Let's go to the next slide. The next question. So here we have prepared for you a list of indicators. So these are the kinds of things that we could be measuring to figure out how digitally transformed institutions or the sectors are or is. So for example, we have here existence of digital strategy, percentage of staff working on digital, and so on. I'll read through them all in a second. What we would like you to do is rate each of those indicators from not useful, which is 1, to very useful, which is 5. So go through the list and tell us what you think about these particular indicators. So they are existence of a digital strategy, percentage of staff working on digital, staff roles or skills in digital, budget for digital collections, growth in visitors to online content, collections available on other platforms like Europeana or Creative Commons, or so on, satisfaction or collection of feedback, or percentage of openly licensed content. We had to get something about openly licensed content in there. So let us know, what do you think? Maybe Nicole, you could tell us a little bit about where some of these indicators came from. So this was connected to the work we were doing around Enumerate and working together on analyzing that data.
So we have already started to map out different indicators as part of our work with the European Commission over the past years. We have been working a bit on indicators for digital transformation, and we have started to map out indicators like these, but many of them, and I can't remember from our panel who mentioned this, you know, the data is already out there in most cases. You know, we're bringing indicators from different data gathering initiatives that exist. And so we have mapped out some, by no means all, of the different data sets, but also those who registered for our event. You also shared some new opportunities which we haven't yet explored. And what we find are some of the indicators are very similar, but they may not be directly comparable, or that, like we may see here, that some indicators are no longer as meaningful as they were maybe 5 years ago, and actually maybe less meaningful definitely in the future. Actually, we don't see that here, sorry. But I think it's that comparison is a very important exercise, knowing what is there. And I think there's a message also from Sylvia in the chat, which was around how do you work with those institutions at a smaller level and get their perspectives on the indicators that count, because they're often the perspectives we don't have. And when we come back to reciprocity and creating value for institutions through the process of data gathering, this is a really important one. I may have rambled. I think I've rambled a little, but so this came from a mapping, and by no means is this mapping complete. As Katerina mentioned, I think as Rahana also mentioned, we think this is a conversation that has to keep going.
Yeah, exactly. And the conversation we have, it's not just about what data we gather, but it's also interesting to know, you know, what other people are gathering data about, or how people are analyzing that data. So interesting. So we've got budget for digital collections coming out on top with digital strategy for this one so far. Interesting insights.
I think someone made the point that data is so connected with budgets.
Yeah, it's true.
Earlier from our panel.
Shall we move to the next slide? I think most people have had a chance to answer.
I think one thing also from
oh wow.
Oh wow.
People already made it to the next one.
Oh, well done to the 9 people who were one step ahead of us. Yes, I think also very quickly from the last slide, we also saw that it's about all those indicators are important to have together. Not one indicator stands out about the rest. It's about painting the picture. I'll hand over to you again, Fiona.
No worries. Yeah, so in this slide and this question, we're asking you to tell us what indicators we should measure. We should use, sorry, to measure digital transformation. So what are your ideas, especially from hearing everything we're discussing today? What ideas do you have about what we should measure? And it looks like we have many responses so far. Maybe we could scroll through them a little bit. Is it possible? Thank you. So, intangible ones. Wow, that's quite cerebral, even for today's conversation. Impact on audiences. Yeah, I mean, for sure, we're really interested to see how we can measure impact. Sustainable preservation strategies. Yeah, I think it's something, this idea around ethics and sustainability is really something that we've got to consider how we can involve that in this work as well going forward.
And reuse coming out strongly also, the uses. And this is something we often struggle to, that was actually coming back to the loss of control. When you make something openly available with no barrier to reuse, no downloads, no email required, email required or paid access, you do lose that control with the audience because it can be downloaded and then the connection, you don't know what happens next with the data.
Yeah.
And this is something we're always trying to work with in Europeana.
Yeah, and long-term thinking about digital transformation. It's not something you do and then you're finished. Absolutely. Digitization, any aspect of digital, as the technology is always changing, then we also have to change how we think about it and what we're doing, what our practices are, and of course then how we can consider measuring that. Fascinating stuff.
Appropriateness of steps taken depending on type, size of organization, which comes back to that very context specific. I think we can leave this this open. So if you have more thoughts, please do add them in, and we'll move on back or hand over back to Hannah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for your
fantastic
input.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you all. That was terrific. Katerina's saying that in the note, can we see the Menti results? I think we've got everything kind of saved in some magical digital binder here, if that's how that works. So indeed, we'll have everything together. My next task is actually to introduce Eva Steingard. So I'll give you some closing thoughts when we actually close. But first, if you thought today was fun and good and useful, but wait, there's more. So Eva's going to say just a few words about the next presidency event that will happen under the EU presidency of Sweden will be chairing in 2023. So Eva, I can't see you. There you are. Wonderful. So please take the floor.
Thank you very much. And hello, everyone. I'm just going to give you a few words on the presidency conference that will take place in the northern part of Sweden in Umeå, which is in mid-February, on 16th to 17th of February. So hopefully you can experience a really good winter there. It has two topics. On the first day will be artistic freedom, and the second day is cultural and creative industries, and is possibly the day that would interest this crowd the most. There are no decisions yet on the Europeana conference, but we are in discussions with Europeana Foundation through the Swedish National Heritage Boards, and hope to get back later on with more information on that. And unfortunately, that's all I had to say today.
That's perfect, and that's enough, Eva. Thank you so much. Wonderful.
Thank you.
I'm just going to say a few words because there's still so many questions here, right? How do we embrace that loss of control with that need that we have, right, for standardized, interoperable data sets? And one of the things I think I'd love to keep pushing out there, and this showed up in the chats a lot, is reminding ourselves that the qualitative input that we get, that isn't just, right, the open-ended answers to surveys. It's really the richness of how people feel about things and what we can observe. Even sometimes we're not even asking the questions, to remind ourselves that it doesn't always have to be measured, right? So it's something to keep in mind as we push forward and try indeed to measure. Sometimes the epiphanies that happen are in that fuzzy front end, where we're really just watching what people do and listening to what they need. And that's where ideas come from. So my pitch for the qualitative. I want to say thank you to everybody. I'm going to let Harry wrap us up completely, but thank you so much for everyone's participation, so active, and to all of our panelists, all of our lightning talks, and especially to both Fiona and Nicole, who have done a banner job. So over to you, Harry.
Yeah, thank you, Anna, and I'll keep it very short. This was a very enriching morning. Yeah, I'm not going to even attempt to synthesize this. I think we need to review the results. What I can say is that this is not the end of the conversation. You will be sent after this meeting all the links that were in the chat, which were useful, so that you have them all in one place to make it more digestible. Nicole and Fiona told me that you can reach out to them at email address, and I'm sure someone will put that in the chat, impact@europeana.eu, if you want to continue this conversation one way or another, have ideas, comments, and so forth. And the two things to look out for. One is the Swedish presidency, as Eva already mentioned. We're going to see how we can weave in the learning points from today into that conference, so that we always try to create bridges between the presidencies. So part of this will be continued there, and in March next year we'll have a whole month of thinking about impact measurements and so forth, and there will be an event, if I'm correct, Nicole, on the 14th of March, starting at 2 o'clock. So you'll hear more about that, but it's a whole month which will be focused on thinking about what does impact mean, how do you measure that, and so forth. I think I will leave it at that. I want to thank everyone, specifically the wonderful panelists and other speakers, and the Czech presidency for supporting us. I wish you a great day. Thank you very much.